Hi everyone, my name is Jamie Michael. I sit on a number of the peak industry bodies, Berries Australia, Strawberries Australia and the Strawberry Growers Association of Western Australia. And I'm also one of the directors for Tea Produce Marketing, which is based in Western Australia. Tea Produce grows and wholesales strawberries for the domestic market. We're a major supplier into Woolies, and we export throughout Asia, the Middle East and New Zealand. And so for those who don't know me, which is probably most, I'll start with a little bit of background. So Tea Produce is owned by myself and my partner Lam T Muir. Lam T and I met in the Perth wholesale market. I grew up in a market gardening family that produced vegetables for export, and I was working in the Perth market while I was studying engineering to try and get away from, going back to the family farming business. Lam T grew up in the export industry. Her father, Des Muir, was a significant player in the early development of Western Australia's vegetable export industry, and he was more notably the guy behind the Pink Lady brand who bought that from a little town in Manjimup and essentially brought it to the world. So when we started, we had a little bit of pedigree already in the export market, and that gave us a fairly good foundation to start from. So the business started in 2003. We were sourcing product from local growers and exporting it overseas. So we were doing melons, mangoes into the UAE. We were doing strawberries into Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia. But the bread and butter back then was really Pink Lady apples into the UK and stone fruit through the Grey Channel via Hong Kong into China. So that was a business that Lam T was already familiar with, and we sort of started using that to underpin what we were doing. But what we noticed soon after starting is there was a decline in Pink Lady and stone fruit exports. In the 90s, WA had been something of a powerhouse in those markets. They did a lot of stone fruit into Asia and the Middle East and a lot of Pink Lady into the UK. But containers were starting to be cancelled, the domestic market was strengthening, and growers and pack houses were getting offered for export, they were committing, then they were shopping their prices to the local market who were then offering more money for them to keep the product locally, and they were pulling out of the orders. So customers overseas were getting really frustrated, and we were getting really frustrated. At the same time, South Africa, South America were ramping up production. And although then their quality was not as good, they were becoming more reliable, they were cheaper, and every season their quality was improving. So every time WA failed to deliver, our export customers had to place their orders elsewhere, and we were opening an opportunity for our competitors to become more established. So it was clear to us that with a few more seasons like that, we would have lost the first market advantage that we had. And the leverage that came with that, and the writing was really on the wall. Back then, we really didn't have any skin in the game, so even if there was anything we could have done about it, we weren't in a position to do so. So, not wanting to damage the relationship that we'd built with importers, we completely pulled out of stone fruit, we pulled out of apples, and we decided to specialise where the growth opportunity was, and that was building a more consistent export market for strawberries. We were geographically and logistically well placed. Our peak season coincided with a gap in the market between the US and the New Zealand seasons, and it was really quite underserviced from Australia. Exports were risky, freight was expensive, and collecting money from overseas was really difficult, and to be honest, that hasn't really changed. So back then, growers really only turned to export when there was a glut in the local market. But because the market was not being serviced consistently and with the right quality, people were essentially taking fruit from the local market when there was a glut and shipping it overseas. The importers were often predatory when it came to dealing with our product. So claims were high, prices were low, and we were really in no way maximising our potential to export. So we worked on improving our reputation and market share in the existing markets that we had and establishing new markets. The expat in Dubai was growing at the time, the Middle East was opening up, and Thailand had recently signed an FTA with Australia where the import duty on strawberries was set to drop from 60% to 0% over 5 years. So we did a lot of work in market, advertising, promotion, and the industry started to be rewarded with greater trust, and we started to receive regular import programs. So export demand quickly grew, but around that time there were only 7 million plants grown in around the Perth area. So as demand grew, we started to short the Perth local market. So what happened in stone fruit was starting to happen in strawberries. Whenever we tried to run a promotion overseas, supply tightened and the price went up. When a promotion ended, it crashed. So we'd factored paying a premium into our pricing, but we still found ourselves choosing between paying an ever increasing market price when we were on promo, or losing money or just letting down our customers. But we knew that if we did, they'd be unlikely to commit to future promotions. So around 15 years ago, we went heavily into our own strawberry production, and we did that to underpin our own supply base, to give us the ability to commit to the markets, overseas, and not sort of cannibalizing ourselves through the activities that we were doing. So today we market both our own fruit, and we consolidate fruit from a good number of the growers in the region for export. We also act as a service and a treatment provider to other exporters to ensure that the markets are well looked after and that we have the most efficient chains possible to get product out from Western Australia. So we've been operating in the berry export space for around 20 years, and we've handled a decent chunk of Australia's strawberry exports in that time. So today I've been asked to present some experiences with exporting over that time, but what can I tell you about export experiences? At first I thought to tell some funny anecdotes, like the time I accidentally booked into the same hotel in Saudi Arabia that was hosting the annual Bin Laden convention and ended up on the Department of Immigration watch list, or when lamb tea was spontaneously taken by an importer in Hong Kong over the border into China to deliver Rolexes to the officials that controlled the grey trade, because she had the audacity to ask them why in China our product was selling for double the price that we were landing it for in Hong Kong. Surely it can't cost that much to get a container just across the border. Now, as fun as those things are, it's not really a true reflection on how exporting is. So usually when people ask about or talk about exports, they have a certain image in their mind of, traveling to exotic destinations and discovering customers who've been waiting forever for us to come along so they can pay us a fortune for our fine Australian products. Their friend recently went on a holiday to China and saw an Australian lobster selling for $200. Or a restaurant in Vietnam charged them $120 on a bottle of red that they can buy at BWS for $15. And anyone that seriously looks into exporting will inevitably come across the government trade facilitation arm, Austrade, who love to portray a world of underdeveloped export markets where customers trip over each other to pay premium prices for the wonderful, clean and green Australian products that we grow. Now, as much as I admire their enthusiasm, and I really wish it was true, it's not entirely accurate. It's no longer the 1600s, and we're not the Dutch East India Company. So to really understand modern exports, we need to understand how the market works. Now, a big part of Austrade's pitch is true. Australian products do have a good reputation in foreign markets. I'm yet to come across an importer who wasn't interested to at least talk about our product. But we're not the only ones with reputation. The USA, New Zealand, Korea, Japan, the EU, they do too. Even South Africa and South America are gaining or have gained enough reputation to be formidable competition in our markets. And there are plenty more emerging. Now, I want to highlight that in talking about my experiences in the export market, I'm not talking about the unique niche specialty lines of product. I'm not referring to the individually wrapped Japanese berries that are retailing for hundreds of dollars a pack. What I'm referring to is what I'm familiar with, which is the high volume commodity line berries that the bulk of our industry produces. So unless you have a unique and exclusive product and you have complete control over where and how it can be sold, like the old single desk marketing schemes, the market will always behave as any free market does. It follows the rules of supply and demand. This means that most export markets will typically now pay the same price as the domestic market for like freely available products. So how does that work? If an Australian product returns a higher price overseas than it does here, exporters will take the product here and will send it overseas. Less fruit supplied here, more fruit supplied over there, means that the price here increases and the price over there reduces until we hit equilibrium. So the net return from export ends up being fairly equal to the net return domestically. So essentially means on freely available like-for-like products, and I say like-for-like because we have to compare products of equal quality and markets of equal quality. It's difficult to achieve export prices that are significantly higher than the domestic price for any prolonged period. And so because of this, from a price perspective, the benefits of having a strong export sector are often overlooked because they're not that obvious or apparent. But the benefits are certainly there, because if we just look at the volumes being exported at the time of the season that it's exported, which is usually the peak season, and consider what would happen to pricing if that volume of product was then added back into the market, we can then reflect on the advantages that we're receiving from exports. So what I'm saying is that export pricing should always be similar to domestic pricing, right? Well, unfortunately that's not the case. In Australia, we're protected from competition by logistics and quarantine barriers, and we have really great consumer patriotism here. There's little opportunity for countries to export berries into Australia, and if they do, the costs of getting them here are really quite high. So an Australian strawberry's biggest competition in Australia is another Australian strawberry. But in overseas markets, we're not only competing with the price of Australian product, but we're competing with the rest of the world. So on like-for-like product, export markets will generally return the same as the Australian domestic market when the Australian market is the cheapest, and less when other countries with similar product are cheaper than us. So unless Australia is offering something that no other country can offer, exports will at best only return similar pricing to what can be achieved on the domestic market. And that's just how the market works. So exporting perishables is both risky and expensive, so why would we bother? It's the same reason why we don't sell all of our fruit to the city closest to where we produce. If we spread the country's total production out over the largest population base, everyone gets the best return. So the industry does not need everyone to export. In fact, it's a really bad idea, because when that happens, we end up competing with ourselves and undercutting the market, and there's enough competition overseas already. The industry just needs everyone to support export and export development, and as long as the industry ensures that every opportunity to remove fruit from the domestic market and serve the broader market or the broader population base is being met by someone, the entire industry will benefit from the exports. And that's through the reduced supply nationally and stronger farm gate pricing. So should we just supply export when the market's oversupplied and the price is cheap and then stop when it gets better? Well, export markets are no different to selling into the markets in Australia. Consistency is key. One theme that is common amongst all these successful exporting brands in horticulture, be it Enza, Zesbury, Sunkiss, Pink Lady, and in the spirit of unity, I'm deliberately not mentioning any global berry brands, is that of a centralized and well-coordinated marketing approach. The growers do the marketing, and the growers do the growing, and the marketers do the marketing. Having a methodical and committed approach ensures that sales are there when we need them. And on the flip side, exporting opportunistically does not. I believe that the dumping of fruit into export markets, which is what we used to do in the old days, actually causes more damage than we gain from it. Dumping erodes the confidence of our regular import partners who are already buying our product because they no longer have predictable competition. And in fact, it's not uncommon for good customers to source fruit from other countries when we dump, just so that they have a point of difference to the fruit that is being dumped. So what's the outlook for strawberry exports? The last 3 years have been particularly challenging. We've had 3 to 5 times increases in shipping costs, lack of direct flights, poor consumer confidence in overseas markets, and lockdowns, which have had a huge impact on the opportunities to export during the COVID period. A few months ago, we lost the IFAM freight subsidy that covered air freight, and bear in mind that all strawberries are air freighted. That was a federal government measure that offset the freight costs. So we're currently paying the highest air freight prices in 25 years. And so we have up to 6 times increases on freight costs compared to the pre-COVID period. So this, coupled with our record high farm gate prices, will most likely result in this year seeing the lowest strawberry export tonnage since we've started. The challenges are certainly laid out for us. But despite this, customer interest overseas is still really strong. They understand the rising costs that growers are facing and that we're facing in the logistics chains. And they're factoring the higher prices into their programs, testing out higher retail price points to see how they can make things work and keep the sales going. So export will be tough for the next few years, but as long as the industry continues to focus on producing the right product, continues to push forward with trying to open up new markets, and continue supporting our old ones, then export should continue to be an important relief valve in the market for years to come.